Kamal, we are going to begin with you and lethality.
We are, yes. Lethality, the new buzzword deployed now at every opportunity by the Ministry of Defence and those in the senior command positions at the head of the army. This is not just being pumped out at the highest levels, but it is also now being sown in the minds of all ranks, most obviously in the most recent edition of the British Army's Soldier magazine. A lengthy piece here details the 5 things every soldier must do now to be ready for war. This is not a subtle message, and it ties into the wider narrative about force development and how the scaled-back army will be able to do more with less as it leverages technology and enhanced manoeuvre capability, or so the Chief of the General Staff says. This would appear to be a rehash of the message put out by the last incumbent, Patrick Sanders, who spoke of the need to be ready for war with Russia, with the concurrent admission that we were in no way prepared for it, hence the need for what he was calling Op Mobilise. Now, General Sir Rowley Walker is repackaging the same message, most recently to the International Armoured Vehicles Conference last month, which was really an extension of his message to the Land Warfare Conference in 2024. And then he was saying that the army must be able to destroy an opposing force of at least 3 times its own size, and that the pamphlets on tactics to achieve that are being rewritten to reflect the new capabilities on the battlefield. But the problem with what Walker's saying is that barely any of the technology of which he speaks is actually ready, and he's had to fall back on the advantages of what's called hybridization, citing the effectiveness of the Ukrainians at doing just this. A questionable position to take. I was looking at a recently published regimental journal which contains several articles about the support of Op Interflex, which has seen over 50,000 Ukrainians trained by British troops, and one such described the utter chaos during the instruction of basic platoon attacks and the questionable interpretation of battlefield discipline and basic soldiering, using the muzzle of their rifle as a chin strap on a live range being a particular favourite. So the propagandizing of the activities of the Ukrainian armed forces is being conducted at every level. Now, alongside the armed forces message of readiness for war is the cry for help from the defence industry, said to be on the brink of failure, with headlines such as this from Politics Home. Now, the Strategic Defence Review, announced in the autumn, is due to be published this spring. It will have taken more than 7 months, and the most likely outcome is that it will articulate the strategy by which the defence industry lines its own pockets as the government makes the case for an enhanced readiness for war, or even for war itself. As an aside, a recent Substack article contained an AI response to the request to produce a version of the Strategic Defence Review, which took just 5 minutes. So it will be interesting to see how much this diverges from the government's own offering, and the link to Keith Deer's piece will be in the show notes. Now, whilst the focus on readiness has been more or less exclusively confined to relations with NATO and the situation in Ukraine, the suggestion of any kind of threat has meant increasingly looking toward Iran. As reported at the time, both Mark Rowley and Ken McCallum, respective heads of the Met Police and MI5, made completely unsubstantiated remarks about the state threat posed by Iran last year. This has been stepped up a notch recently, with the very close parallels to the fabrication of the war narrative by the Blair government in 2002 and 2003. Hamish Falconer, Minister for the Middle East and North Africa, responded to questions put to him on Iran on the 14th of January of this year, saying, "We are working urgently on measures to take the necessary action to deter the Iranian state from posing a threat to this country and the region." He goes on to say, "It is regrettably true that Iran's nuclear program has never been more advanced, and it threatens international peace and security." So he has effectively said that he believes there to be an imminent threat from Iran, specifically with regard to their nuclear capability. Now, at this point, it is worth noting that he is the son of Lord Falconer, who, by being part of Tony Blair's inner circle, was, of course, implicated in the fabrication of the case for war in 2003, especially with regard to the advice that the Attorney General took and his change on such advice on the legality of that war. Now, it seems more than ironic now, of course, that the Lord Falconer himself should be leading the assisted dying bill. Nonetheless, Hamish Falconer's statement is an outright corruption of the truth, and he has no evidence or intelligence to be able to back it up with. Firstly, the Congressional Research Service in the United States reported this in December of last year. According to US intelligence assessments, Tehran has the capacity to produce nuclear weapons at some point, but has halted its nuclear weapons program and has not mastered all of the necessary technologies for building such weapons. On this side of the Atlantic, the Commons briefing paper on the subject makes constant references to the belief that there is no credible civilian justification for the alleged quantities of enriched uranium, but it goes no further than saying that this amount would theoretically be enough for 4 nuclear explosive devices. So for context, in May of last year, the government committed £196 million to Urenco to, quote, produce advanced nuclear fuel, a market currently dominated by Russia, to help fuel nuclear power plants at home and abroad. This is part of the government plan to push Putin out of the global energy market and drive down energy bills. And of course, back in 2012, Gordon Brown offered atomic expertise for countries not developing nuclear weapons capabilities, with the creation of what was called a uranium bank for the development of civil power programs. And this did include Iran. So whilst the intelligence hasn't changed, the message certainly has. And this concerns in some way the failure of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA, or the Iran nuclear deal from 2015 between Iran, the UK, China, France, Germany, Russia, and the US. And its intent was to limit the Iranian nuclear program in exchange for sanctions relief. So from that, it seems that we're meant to believe that the only reason Iran might now not satisfy the conditions of this agreement is because it must be engaged in the development of a nuclear arsenal. Now, if this is sounding familiar, that's because it is, only this time it's Iran and not Iraq. Coincident with all of this, with these developments, is the startlingly inaccurate portrayal of the threat assessment, and that's been the announcement of the sentencing of Daniel Khalif. On the 3rd of February, he was sentenced to over 14 years for offences under the Official Secrets Act 1911 and the Terrorism Act 2000, as well as a prison escape during the time he was held on remand. And the counter-terrorism account of the case sounds very much less than robust, using phrases such as the finding of a potential improvised explosive device, which could have been just about anything. The circumstances around the case are flimsy at best. Khalif, as a 22-year-old Lance Corporal with the Royal Signals, was said to have passed highly sensitive information to the Iranians after first appealing to the security services to operate as a double agent. But it turned out the messages supposedly from Iran had been created by him, making the entire episode look rather more like a fantasy than a reality. Nonetheless, the narrative point about this story is that it concerns an apparent subversion by Iran of a member of the armed forces. And of course, we've seen the Trump administration making its intentions very clear towards Iran, the aim being to seriously compromise their economy and indeed, from the American point of view, to align with the strategy of the state of Israel. The UK's statistics on trade show a significant drop in import and export with Iran during the last 12 months. So going back to the military side of it, Rowley Walker's insistence that we're getting set for doing more with less, I think the question remains, which is who would fight such a war? And that takes us to conscription and national service, both of which were aired in the public forum during 2024, and it's gone quiet at least for now. But in March of that year, Lord Minto said, "My lords, the government have no plans to reintroduce national service or any form of conscription," in answer to a question on that subject. But there seems little doubt that this narrative will be given more and more oxygen as 2025 unfolds, and the UK column will, of course, be keeping a very close eye on it.
Thank you, Charles. Okay, and let's